They say language is the heartbeat of a nation. But what happens when the language of one small nation travels across the world and begins to take root in a land that seems so different from its own? What happens when Tagalog, the language of the Philippines, starts echoing in the streets of Israel, from markets in Tel Aviv to quiet homes in Jerusalem? The sound of Tagalog is no longer unusual. But how did this happen? And why is Tagalog slowly becoming Israel's second language? The untold Filipino story begins with a journey of survival, resilience, and love. Many years ago, waves of Filipinos left their homeland, not out of desire, but out of necessity. Jobs were scarce. Poverty was harsh, and families dreamed of a better life across the seas, so they went to countries that welcomed their strength, their dedication, and their kindness. Israel was one of those places. At first, it started quietly. Filipinos came to work as caregivers, looking after Israel's elderly population and those with special needs. They were hired because of their patience, their warmth, and their ability to give care not just as a duty, but as if every stranger were their own family. Soon, thousands of Filipino workers filled Israeli households. And when you live inside someone's home, you bring more than just your skills. You bring your language, your laughter, your songs, and your prayers. The elderly began to hear Tagalog words every day. Simple words like kain, which means eat, or tubig, which means water slowly. These words blended into the daily rhythm of Israeli life. Children in the homes heard these words so often that they started repeating them at school. Friends picked them up, neighbors learned them too. In time, it wasn't just the elderly, but entire families that could understand and even speak a little Tagalog. But the story doesn't end there. The Filipino presence grew stronger, not only in numbers, but in culture. In the busy streets of Tel Aviv, Filipino stores appeared selling longanisa, adobo, and halo in churches. Filipino voices filled the air with hymns and prayers on weekends. Filipino communities held festivals, dancing to traditional songs, wearing colorful costumes and cooking food that Israelis began to love soon. Locals found themselves craving lumpia and pancit just as much as falafel and hummus. And when food brings people together, language always follows. Hebrew words mixed with Tagalog words in daily conversations. And a new hybrid culture was born. But there is a deeper reason why Tagalog has taken root in Israel. It's not just about food or music, it's about heart. Filipinos gave their all to Israel's people, caring for grandparents, raising children, supporting families in moments of weakness. And in return, Israel grew to respect them, admire them, and slowly absorb their way of life. Unlike other immigrant groups, Filipinos did not isolate themselves. They blended their love into Israeli families so deeply that even after work contracts ended, many stayed. Some married Israelis. Some had children who grew up speaking Hebrew and Tagalog side by side. Imagine being a child in Tel Aviv. Your father speaks Hebrew, your mother speaks Tagalog. Your grandparents eat gefilte fish, but your cousins love adobo. That is the reality of many families today. These children become bridges of culture, naturally fluent in two languages, and teaching their friends to understand both. Now imagine the impact multiplied across thousands of households, across cities, across generations. In time, the number of Israelis who could speak or understand Tagalog grew so large that it became impossible to ignore. Schools began noticing children using Tagalog words at play. Teachers learned phrases to communicate with Filipino parents. Hospitals hired translators who knew both Hebrew and Tagalog because so many patients and caregivers used it together. Television networks reported stories in Tagalog. News outlets interviewed Filipinos in their native tongue, and social media spread Tagalog phrases across Israeli feeds. Tagalog was no longer just the language of workers. It became the language of neighbors, of friends, of family. But the story has another layer. Israel is a nation of immigrants built by people who carried their languages from around the world. Russian, French, Arabic, Amharic, Yiddish, English, Hebrew. The list is endless. So when Tagalog arrived, it didn't feel foreign. It felt like another thread in Israel's rich cultural fabric. But unlike some languages that fade with generations, Tagalog kept growing stronger because of the close relationships Filipinos built within homes. This is the secret: Filipinos weren't just living in Israel, they were living with Israelis side by side, day after day, heart to heart. And when you care for someone's grandmother, when you raise someone's child, when you sing someone to sleep, your words become unforgettable. And so Tagalog words stayed. They settled into the minds and tongues of Israelis. Slowly, naturally, permanently. But what makes this story even more fascinating is the timing. In recent years, Israel faced labor shortages. Filipinos stepped in once more, and their numbers grew larger than ever. In Tel Aviv alone, entire districts speak Tagalog in cafes, in churches, and community centers. Israelis walking by hear conversations that sound like music to the ear at weddings. Hebrew and Tagalog vows are exchanged at workplaces. Colleagues switch between both languages with ease at schools. Children laugh in a blend of words that would confuse outsiders, but make perfect sense to them. So now experts and historians are beginning to say what once seemed impossible. Tagalog is becoming Israel's second language, and it's not just about statistics, it's about visibility, about how normal it has become to hear Tagalog everywhere you go. But beneath all this is an untold truth. Tagalog represents more than a language. It represents the sacrifices of mothers who left their children behind to care for others. It represents the love of fathers who sent money home every month so their families could survive. It represents resilience, patience, and the quiet strength of a people who carried their culture across oceans and planted it in foreign soil where it bloomed. Tagalog in Israel is more than communication. It is legacy. It is the bridge between two nations, two peoples, two histories. And today, Israelis who once saw Filipinos only as workers now see them as part of their own story, part of their identity, part of their language. So the next time you walk in Tel Aviv and hear a child shout, "Tara, let's go," or hear a grandmother whisper, "Salamat," thank you, remember, you are not just hearing a foreign word, you are hearing the untold Filipino story. A story of how a language traveled across oceans and found a new home. A story of how Tagalog is quietly but powerfully becoming Israel's second language. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this story is that it was never forced. It was never demanded. It was never imposed. It grew from love, from care, from sacrifice, from the simple daily act of Filipinos giving their hearts to others. And in return, Israel gave them space, gave them respect, gave them a voice in its own culture. This is why Tagalog is rising in Israel. This is why people now say it could be the country's second language, because in the end, language is not just words, it is memory, it is love, it is home.